Chapter 2484. In front of Yi Qian, she felt guilty, but in front of her former classmates, He Jiamin still had the same temper. They were all the same. There was no need for her to be afraid. Tan Wei was a smooth talker. He smiled and said, 4 years ago, we were all girls in our teens. How could we know so much? We didn't think so much. It's different now. We haven't kept in touch with Sun Ying since we graduated from middle school. Like you guys, we didn't expect her to be so ruthless. That's true. The girl who asked the question didn't say anything else. When she looked away, she rolled her eyes at He Jiamin and snorted to express her disdain. He Jiamin's heart was stifled. Why are you so angry? I'm here today to help you repair your relationship with Yi Jian, not to have conflicts with other students. Tan Wei frowned and tried to persuade him. If you continue like this, you'll suffer a bigger loss sooner or later. Tan Wei's eyes suddenly widened. Then his expression changed. He tightened his grip on He Jiamin's hand and said, Are you still not convinced? Jiamin, are you crazy? You were upset about Yi Qian in high school. Have you forgotten? It's already generous of her not to hold a grudge against you. You still dare to be unconvinced. During the military training in the second year of high school, Yaro Jing and Luo Ran tried to embarrass Yi Qian. Sun Ying and He Jiamin also tried to do the same. Later, when He Jiamin found out that Yi Qian performed well in the military training, she was scared and wrote a letter to Tan Wei to mention it. When Tan Wei found out, he wrote a letter to scold He Jiamin and told her to stay away from Sun Ying. Now, looking at He Jiamin's expression, Tan Wei couldn't help but shudder. Jiamin, if you continue to be like this, I won't treat you as a friend anymore. Tan Wei didn't try to persuade her anymore. He let go of her wrist and shook his head in disappointment. What makes you think you're better than Yi Qian? Look at you. You're just an ordinary factory worker who didn't even graduate from high school. And Yi Qian, he's a military student. Don't even think about wearing that military uniform for the rest of your life. Do you understand? This is the difference between you and Yi Qian. Look carefully. Even his future path will be different from yours. He Jiamin didn't say a word as she stubbornly pursed her lips. Of course, she knew the difference between her and Yi Qian. It was because she knew it that she couldn't accept it. Just now when she was talking to Yi Qian, even her fingers were trembling. She was afraid that Yi Qian would make things difficult for her. In the past, she was the only one who could make things difficult for Yi Qian. Before she saw Yi Qian, she didn't feel much. Now that she saw her, she was shocked. When she came over to talk to her, she was so scared that even her fingers were trembling. At that time, he didn't think too much about it. Now that he had calmed down and thought about it, his heart was filled with resentment. A person who had been bullied by her in the past had actually become the biggest winner and made her tremble in fear. The huge difference made her feel uneasy. The more she thought about it, the more ashamed and angry she felt. Tan Wei immediately distanced himself from He Jiamin and severed ties with her. He didn't want a classmate like her. Wave after wave of discussions from the audience reached Yi Jifan's ears. They were like the sharpest arrows, instantly piercing him into a bloody mess. What was this? What was this? This was humiliating him. He clearly knew, but what could he do? It was impossible for him to protest. The audience seats were meant to accompany the audience. Could he say loudly, he doesn't want to see any of this, ask them to leave, or something like that? What right did he have to say that? Chapter 2485. Facing the piercing gazes and hearing the insulting comments, Yi Jifan, who had handcuffs on his hands and ankles on his feet, walked to the front of the audience on the left with a loud clang. He was attending the trial of his daughter, Sun Ying, as a prisoner. On the left side of the courtroom were Yi Qian and Sun Ying's classmates. The right side of the courtroom was reserved for Sun Dongqing. Yi Jifan stood still as Sun Dongqing, who was wearing a female prisoner's uniform, was escorted out by the police. The moment the door opened, Sun Dongqing looked up. Her expression was the same as Yi Jifan's. Why were there so many people? These people weren't strangers. They were her daughter's classmates. Her middle school classmates, her high school classmates, and her classmates from various training classes. Why were they all here? Why were they all here? Seeing the young faces, Sun Dongqing couldn't help but tremble. She wasn't trembling for herself, but for her daughter, Sun Ying. Her daughter was still young. In the future, she would enter society and make friends from all over the world. She would tell her former classmates how successful she was and how glorious she was. Her daughter would become the envy of many people in the future, but, now they were all her daughter's classmates. Among them were her daughter's close friends. They were all here. They were all here. She had never mentioned her daughter's imprisonment to anyone. She was even more afraid of bumping into her daughter's former classmates. She wanted to keep it a secret for her daughter. When her daughter was released in the future, she could continue to bask in glory. But now they were all here. They were all here. How could she hide it? How could she hide it? She couldn't hide it anymore. The scandal of her daughter being sent to prison and sent back by the army couldn't be hidden anymore. God damn it. They weren't giving Ying a way out. God damn it. They were forcing her daughter, who always cared about her reputation, to die. Sun Dongqing couldn't move her feet. She really couldn't move. What about her daughter? When Ying came out and saw her classmates and friends, how desperate would she be? How sad would she be? Sun Dongqing's eyes were trembling as she looked at the faces one by one. With tears in her eyes, she looked at them with trembling hands. The faces became a little blurry, and she couldn't see them clearly no matter how hard she tried. I beg you, I beg you. I beg you, let these people go, okay? I'm begging you. My daughter won't be able to take it, she really won't be able to take it. Sun Dongqing, who loved her daughter dearly, begged, my daughter cares about her reputation the most. These are all her classmates. I beg you, please let my daughter feel better. She has already suffered so much. I beg you to be merciful and let her feel better. The bailiff ignored her. Seeing that she didn't want to leave, he dragged her to the audience seats on the right. Sun Dongqing, whose tears were streaming down her cheeks, could finally see the figure clearly. She saw Yi Jifan. In that second, she, whose heart had died, poured all her hatred onto Yi Jifan. They were husband and wife. They were the closest people to each other, but after a divorce, a betrayal, and a fight, they became enemies. Her lifeless eyes suddenly burst into flames. Yi Jifan, you deserve this. Her tone was so cold that it was as if she couldn't wait to gnaw on his flesh and bones. It sent chills down one's spine. Sun Dongqing. The bailiff warned her coldly. Noise is strictly prohibited in the courtroom. If there's a next time, you will be disqualified. Chapter 2486. Sun Dongqing, who hadn't seen her daughter for a long time and was now worried about her daughter's upcoming court appearance, swallowed the hatred in her heart. She swallowed it until she bit her own tongue until her mouth was filled with the taste of blood. She swallowed it with her mouth, but her eyes couldn't help it. She glared fiercely at Yi Jifan, as if she would break free from the police at any moment and pounce on Yi Jifan to take him down with her. Hey! Isn't this Auntie Sun Ying's mother? No way, Sun Ying's mother also committed a crime and is locked up. A girl exclaimed in disbelief, it's really her mother. I didn't see wrongly, it's really her mother. As soon as she spoke, the people around her immediately pricked up their ears. It's true, I've never seen her mother. Oh my God, isn't this family of 3 in jail? As soon as she spoke, the discussions came one after another. Sun Dongqing was so embarrassed that she turned her head left and right in an attempt to escape. They're definitely all in jail. Her mother is also wearing a prison uniform. Her mother reported her father, and in the end, they're all in jail together. Do you think her mother regrets writing the report letter? Who knows? Whatever, let's just listen carefully. Sun Ying's whole family is so scary. It's better if they're locked up. Sun Ying will be locked up too. Just thinking about how I used to eat and drink with her, and how we used to sleep on the same bed when we went out to play, makes my hair stand on end. Such a ruthless person, she's really capable of doing anything. Don't be afraid. It's not too late to find out now. Just stay away from her in the future. When these words fell into Sun Dongqing's ears, she, who was in despair, was so angry that her whole body trembled. Ying is such a good girl, what are you looking down on her for? She raised her head and wanted to glare at the young girl who said these words, but a face that she hated to the bone suddenly appeared in her vision. Yi Qian, she saw Yi Qian. Damn girl. She still has the face to come here. She didn't save anyone and still has the face to come here in a military uniform. Isn't she ashamed? No, right now, it wasn't Yi Qian who was being humiliated, it was her precious daughter who was being humiliated. God damn it, it was all this bastard's fault. That bastard who didn't even try to save her daughter had caused her Ying to lose so much face. On one side was Yi Zhifan, and on the other side was Yi Qian. This was great. The people Sun Dongqing hated the most were all present. She couldn't even see enough. It's these two bastards who deserve to die. She caused Ying to be in such a miserable state. If she had followed him to save Ying that day, none of this would have happened. The heavens were blind. The old thing had been shut down, but Yi Qian, that bastard, could still continue to be so carefree. She even deliberately wore a military uniform to provoke Ying. What a cruel and vicious heart. The heavens were blind. No one could see the true face of this bastard. Sun Dongqing's face was twisted, and her eyes were filled with a sinister light. She glared at Yi Qian. There was too much hatred in her heart, and she was too angry. She clenched her teeth so hard that the sound of bones being gnawed could be heard. The bailiff nudged Sun Dongqing, who had stopped walking, again. Sun Dongqing, walk forward. Sun Dongqing, who wanted to glare at Yi Qian again, was awakened by the bailiff's cold voice. She had no choice but to walk forward. Although she was walking, her entire attention was focused on Yi Qian. She didn't even spare a glance at anyone else. Until the villagers of Shuiku village. Sun Dongqing hadn't seen them yet. From tilting her head to turning her head, she kept staring at Yi Qian. She walked around the audience seats and arrived at the audience seats where the villagers of Shuiku village were seated. Sun Dongqing, I didn't expect you to have such a day. Chapter 2487. A voice filled with schadenfreude came from behind. Sun Dongqing, who had yet to sit down, suddenly froze. The resentful expression on her face froze for a moment. Why did she hear the voice of the famous gossipy woman in the village? What's wrong? You don't even dare to look at your neighbors. That's right. You've done something wrong and are waiting to be sentenced. How would you dare to be arrogant like before, looking down on us barefoot commoners with your nose in the air? A familiar ear-piercing voice rang out clearly. Sun Dongqing turned her head and saw several villagers from Shuiku village. She was stunned. Even the villagers knew about Ying's situation. Then, how would Ying return to the village in the future? Why was her Ying's life so miserable? All she met were a bunch of people who kicked her when she was down. None of them stood up to help her. They were all a bunch of despicable people. Sun Dongqing's heart was filled with anger. Her mouth was so bitter that it felt like a handful of Chinese gold thread was stuffed into it. Life in prison wasn't too good. Look, you've lost a lot of weight. TSK, TSK, TSK. You used to be as fat as a pig. When you walked, your chest swayed like a sack. Now that you've slimmed down, you're not as annoying as before. The person who spoke was you Big Mouth, who used to flatter her. In the past, she used to have a laughable face to please her. Now, this bitch even dared to step on her face. Hearing these despicable words, the furious Sun Dongqing's chest rose and fell rapidly. Her face was green, white, and purple. It was extremely interesting. She glared fiercely. Just as her cracked mouth opened and closed a little, the curses rushed to her throat. The bailiff's cold voice came. Sun Dongqing, sit down. The cold and serious voice reminded Sun Dongqing. Once again, she had no choice but to shut her mouth. Retribution, Sun Dongqing. You also have a day like this. It's really retribution, ha ha ha. You Big Mouth said in a low voice and laughed softly. Her words were filled with the taste of watching a show. This made Sun Dongqing secretly clench her fists. Sun Dongqing, who didn't dare to curse out loud, could only curse in her heart. She sat down. Two bailiffs stood beside her, one on the left and one on the right, to prevent her from disrupting the judicial order. Too hateful. Too hateful. These people were too hateful. Her poor daughter, what about her? When she came out and saw these people, she would go crazy. She would really go crazy. Yu Dazhui still wanted to vent her anger and get back at Sun Dongqing for the whole day. When the bailiff gave her a warning, Yu Dazhui was shocked and immediately shut her mouth. If you don't want to say it, then don't say it. What's there to warn me about? Who are you trying to scare? She muttered softly. In the end, she did not dare to say anything more. Sun Dongqing, who finally has some peace and quiet, slowly loosens her clenched fists. Although there are villagers with their backs facing the Shuiku village, sitting in front of her feels like a thorn in her back. They were all people he knew. Even if he went out in the future, he would be pointed at and talked about wherever he went. She was already old, so it didn't matter. However, Yingying was different. She was still at the age of a flower bud. Today, all these people were here. How was she going to face the criticism of others in the future? How was her poor daughter going to live in the future? As soon as Sun Dongqing thought about Sun Ying's appearance, her heart ached for her daughter. Yi Zhifan was so embarrassed that his face turned red. He didn't have the face to face the audience. Sun Dongqing was really thinking for Sun Ying. As a mother, she was undoubtedly qualified to be Sun Ying's mother. Chapter 2488. Sun Dongqing, whose heart was in a mess, couldn't sit still. She urgently needed to find an outlet to vent her anger. She once again looked at Yi Jian with resentment. Only by glaring fiercely like this could she feel a little more comfortable and reconciled. Sun Dongqing was cursing in her heart, and when she saw that young face again, her heart rate became unstable. Her daughter was going to go crazy, she was definitely going to go crazy. The tears that she tried so hard to hold back flowed down again, and she glared at Yi Qian even more fiercely and fiercely. When she glared at Yi Qian, Hu Zi, who was sitting with her, naturally felt it too. He sent a text message to Xia Yiwei, who was resting in the hotel. He turned to Yi Qian and said calmly, "She won't change. She'll be a problem as long as we keep her. We should get rid of all future troubles." Hu Zi knew a few people in prison, so it was possible to get rid of Sun Dongqing. Yi Qian understood what he meant. He shook his head and said softly, "Sorry to trouble you, Brother Zi. She doesn't need us to deal with her, someone else will. People with bad tempers usually offend people more easily." Sun Dongqing not only had a bad temper, but she also always thought that she was better than others. When she was sentenced and sent to prison, she would suffer. In prison, there was no lack of bad-tempered prisoners. Hu Zi smiled faintly and didn't say anything more. He gave the suggestion, and whether Yi Qian listened to him or not was his business. A girl with her own ideas usually wouldn't make things difficult for herself. But she was right. Take director Yi's wife for example. With her temper and the sense of loss from falling from the clouds to the mud, the process was very torturous. With a bad temper, she couldn't accept the fact that she lost her identity. If the prisoners next to her were to say something sarcastic, something big would happen. Therefore, a girl with her own ideas usually wouldn't make things difficult for herself, and wouldn't let herself be taken advantage of. As for director Yi Wei said that he was involved in the murder of the martyr Sun Xueqing. This wasn't an ordinary crime. In addition, he helped Sun Yaozu with a few land bids, so it was enough for him to stay here for the rest of his life. 2 minutes to 2:00, a clerk in court uniform walked out. He finished explaining the court rules, and the presiding judge and the judge sat down. Hu Zi also stood up, and his gaze fell on the solemn national emblem hanging in the middle of the courtroom. He covered his mouth and coughed softly. He suddenly remembered that it was the first time he had come to the court as a gangster, and he was even listening in as a spectator. When he saw the solemn national emblem, he instantly felt a little strange. After the presiding judges, the court. It was time for the trial to begin. The presiding judge informed the bailiff to bring Sun Ying to court. Sun Yaozu, wearing a female's prison uniform, with handcuffs on her hands' handcuffs. After a few months of prison life, Sun Yaozu was as thin as a piece of paper. She was so light that it seemed like the wind could blow her away. But her eyes were so bright that it was scary. They were big and bright, and the light in them wasn't as bright as the sun. Instead, they were filled with darkness, as if they were crazy enough to destroy everything. The first thing Sun Ying did when she walked out of the arena was to look for Yi Jian. Perhaps she was tired of seeing him, but before she could walk out of the arena, she saw Yi Jian in his military uniform among the audience. She was wearing a prison uniform, and Yi Qian, the person she hated the most, the person she wanted to step on the most, was wearing a military uniform and sitting among the audience, looking at her. She was a prisoner, she was a soldier. One was in heaven, one was on earth. Chapter 2489. It's Yi Ying. Ah, no, it's Sun Ying. It's really her. It's her. Why else would we be here? Sun Ying's classmates were the first to speak. They pointed and frowned, their eyes full of disdain. Yi Jian was no stranger to these gazes. In her previous life, she had lived in such disdainful gazes all her life. She had been pointed at by others all her life. That's Yi Qian. I couldn't tell that he was this kind of person. He knows how to seduce a teacher at such a young age. P2E. This kind of woman should be drowned in a pig cage. Let's stay away from her. Look at her seductive appearance. I can tell she's not a good person. That's her towel, right? There shouldn't be any infectious diseases on it, right? Throw it in the trash. We can't keep this clothes rack either. Throw it all away. Throw it all away. I want to change dorms. I don't want to be in the same dorm as her. The insults from her previous life echoed in her ears. Mockery, ridicule, insults, ridicule, disdain, isolation, rejection. In her previous life, she lived such a life until her death. In this life, she was bullied by her classmates in the first half of her second year of middle school. Sun Dongqing beat her and Sun Ying insulted her. Today, there was an earth-shattering change. It was no longer Yi Qian who was being pointed and gossiped about, but it was finally Sun Ying's turn. 2 lives. After waiting for 2 lives, she finally saw this day. She had to admit that Madame Li's arrangement made her very, very satisfied. Yi Qian, who was sitting in the audience, curled his lips. His faint smile was cold. It made his originally cold and indifferent facial features have a touch of mystery. Even though he knew it was dangerous, he still wanted to investigate. The voices of the people pointing and gossiping converged into an arrow. Before Sun Ying could react, there was a whoosh sound as it shot towards her. Her footsteps paused for a moment. She stared blankly in front of her. What's going on? What's going on? Why? Why did she see so many people? Her middle school classmates, her high school classmates, and her former classmates from the training class. No. No. She didn't want to see these people. She didn't want to see these people. She was Yi Ying, not Sun Ying. She was Yi Ying, who was envied by her classmates. She had a father who was a high-ranking official and lived a rich life. She could get whatever she wanted. Even if she did something wrong, she would be forgiven. Even the teachers would not punish her easily. In front of them, she was the outstanding Yi Ying who was loved by her teachers and envied by her classmate. Why did they come? What kind of look was that? Looking down on him? Looking at him with disdain? Who do you think you are to look down on her? Sun Ying was completely nailed to the ground by the incessant discussion. She couldn't take another step. She couldn't take another step. She couldn't accept the looks in those people's eyes and the way they were pointing at her. The things that she wanted to hide were exposed to everyone. From now on, she would live in the eyes of these people, who would say that she was a prisoner who was rejected by the army. No, she did not want to go out. She did not want to go out. Sun Ying's palm-sized face was filled with fear. She refused to go out and face her classmates today. Now that they knew, what was she going to do in the future? Chapter 2490. Sob. What was she going to do in the future? How was she going to live? How was she going to maintain her sense of superiority? Her head was no longer held high. Instead, she lowered it again and again. She wanted to hide in a hole so that no one could see her. No, she didn't want them to see her like this. She didn't want them to see her like this. No, she didn't want to go out. She didn't want the wretched girl whom she had once trampled to death to see her in such a sorry state. I want to go back. I don't want to go out. I want to go back. Sun Ying, who felt extremely humiliated, didn't want to leave. She stood there and shrank back. She wanted to escape from everyone's sight. She didn't want her former classmates to see her in a prison uniform. I'm not guilty. I can't go out in a prison uniform. I need to change my clothes. I need to change my clothes before I go out. Sun Ying began to struggle, but she didn't dare to go too far. She could only beg in a small voice. The bailiffs didn't ignore the rules of the court. Sun Ying wasn't the only prisoner who made a request before the trial. The two expressionless bailiffs dragged Sun Ying, who didn't want to appear in court, to the courtroom. I don't want. I don't want. I don't want to. Sob. Mom. Mom, I don't want to appear in court. Sun Ying appeared in front of everyone with disheveled hair. When Sun Dongqing saw this, she didn't care about the warning anymore. She screamed at the top of her lungs, Ying Ying, Mom is here. Mom is here with you. Don't be afraid, don't be afraid. Mom is here. Sun Ying heard a familiar voice and raised her head. Her eyes were red as she finally found Sun Dongqing. She wanted to shout and put on a show of mother-daughter reunion, but the presiding judge picked up the hammer and knocked it 3 times. His voice was very serious. Silence. Don't make a noise. The presiding judge warned and didn't let the bailiffs take Sun Dongqing away. Sun Ying saw Sun Dongqing at the scene, and her eyes were filled with tears. She wanted to ask her mother for help, but when she saw Sun Dongqing wearing the same prison uniform as her, and Yi Jifan in a male prison uniform from the corner of her eye, Sun Ying closed her eyes. She refused to look at the scene that made her feel despair. A family of 3, all dressed in prison uniforms. As for her, the person she looked down on the most, the person she wanted to trample on the most, was dressed in a military uniform. His features were picturesque, and he only needed to sweep his gaze across the family of 3 dressed in prison uniforms. The students sitting next to her all looked at her. Although they no longer pointed at her, their eyes were full of contempt, as if they were looking at a criminal. They all looked down on him and thought that he was unforgivable. What right do you have to look down on her? Do you think you're any better? She still wanted to laugh at her. Dream on. No one could laugh at her, belittling her. No one had the right to do so. She would not return to Shueku village, nor would she contact anyone. She could even change her name and live in another place. That way, wouldn't no one recognize him? No one knows about my past. Sun Ying, who was forced to despair by everyone's gazes, found another excuse for herself. It had to be said that she was a very strong-willed person. She could escape from reality time and time again, forever living in the world she made up for herself. In this world, she was the queen. So, whenever Sun Ying felt dissatisfied, it would trigger the self-righteous chord in her heart. Chapter 2491. At this moment, Sun Ying was enraged. The fire in her heart erupted like a volcano that had been dormant for thousands of years. She also felt humiliated, and this humiliation came from that videotape. And who sent that videotape? It could only be Yi Qian, only her. Today, she was in this state because of Yi Qian's videotape. Other than her, no one else could have schemed to harm her. Therefore, she had to leave. She couldn't just sit there and wait for death. She couldn't admit defeat. There were so many classmates who came to laugh at her. She couldn't afford to lose. Yi Ying, you're Yi Ying. You can't admit defeat. You can't admit defeat. Sun Ying kept encouraging herself as her vision darkened. Her legs were trembling, and she tried her best to relax so that she wouldn't look too pathetic. She let the 2 police officers lead her out. Her former classmates all saw her expression. Seeing her expression, they couldn't help but feel surprised and amused. She was wearing a prisoner's uniform, but she could still lift her chin and look at them coldly. This Sun Ying was really amazing. She glared at me just now. Damn, she looked like she wanted to kill someone. A boy from her former junior high class whispered to Zhu Liao, she's really disgusting like this. Don't say anything. Otherwise, the judge will hammer you again. Zhu Liao glanced at Sun Ying. She was indeed disgusting. At this point, She was still pretending that she didn't do anything wrong. This kind of person was really disgusting. Another wave of whispers came. Sun Ying, who was walking out, vaguely heard someone say, "I've stayed away from her. I still have her contact information. I'll delete it when I get back. There's also a message in my graduation album. I'll tear it up when I get back." These whispers came faintly. Sun Ying suddenly felt humiliated from head to toe. Her face felt like it had been slapped a few times. It was so painful that even her toes curled up. Yi Qian naturally heard it too. "Listen, Sun Ying. These are the words you deserve. No matter how hard you try to escape, they'll follow you like a shadow. They'll follow you like a shadow that you can't shake off. They'll haunt you day and night until you break down. You can escape from reality now, but in the future, you will only be more miserable. At that time, I hope you can continue to avoid reality." Yi Jifan's daughter is also an anomaly. If it were anyone else, they would have drowned in her saliva. Even if she didn't drown, she would have died of shame. Hu Zi glanced at Sun Ying, who was pretending to be fine. He saw through her with one glance and revealed a faint mocking smile. He sighed to Yi Qian and said, "This kind of person won't learn from her mistakes. It's hard to endure now. After this, they will continue to stir up trouble. Let's see what Madame Li will do." For the first time, Yi Qian took the initiative to glance at Sun Ying, who was still staring at him. He tilted his head slightly and answered Hu Zi, "Madame Li will make her beg for death. Now that she's certain that she'll be able to get out, let's just let her be happy for a while." On the other side, Sun Ying's gaze met with Yi Qian's. Her gaze couldn't help but fall on Yi Qian's military uniform. The vibrant green color made her eyes hurt. She had worn this kind of uniform before. She had worn it before. But she had only worn it for a few days before taking it off and handing it over. Hand it over, hand it over. What's the big deal? She didn't care. Sun Ying's eyes flashed with deep jealousy. She constantly adjusted her breathing to numb herself in exchange for a peace of mind. Chapter 2492. As she walked through the audience, she heard the voices floating from above. She kept telling herself, "It's okay. It's okay. They're not important people. Let them say whatever they want." She was so embarrassed that she wanted to find a hole to hide in, but she had to numb herself and choose to escape from reality. Then she stood up again and again. This time, Sun Ying believed that she could walk out of prison because Madame Li had promised her. Secondly, someone came to visit her last night and gave her a reassuring pill. "You don't have to be afraid. Since Madame Li allowed you to leave, she's naturally prepared a foolproof plan for you. Besides, you didn't commit any substantial crimes. At most, you'll be charged with defamation. What's there to be afraid of? Behave yourself tomorrow." It wasn't easy for Madame Li to arrange all this. If you ruin the plan, you might not be able to leave. Tomorrow, be good and behave. That way, you'll have less trouble. Do you understand? The words of someone who came to tell her last night echoed in her mind. Sun Ying, whose legs were trembling, gradually relaxed. There was nothing to be afraid of. Madame Li had already arranged everything. Other than defamation, there was no need to worry about any other charges. The army sent her back. It had nothing to do with Yi Qian. She had already accepted the fine and imprisonment. Today, she would definitely regain her freedom like that person said last night. Regaining her freedom was what she had dreamed of day and night. Even if it meant stepping on her biological father's life, she would walk out of prison. Every man for himself, and the devil takes the hindmost. This was what her good father taught her. Her good father, who didn't care about his own family for his own future, taught her. Just a second ago, Sun Ying was so embarrassed that he wanted to dig a hole in the ground because of his prison uniform. But now, he suddenly grinned. It was extremely eerie and terrifying. She no longer lowered her head. Instead, she raised her head and admitted defeat. No, she would not admit defeat. Even if she was Sun Ying and not Yi Ying, she would not admit defeat. Madame Li said that she would regain her freedom this time. The person who came to visit her last night also said that she would be fine. See? Even if she was in prison uniform, there were still people helping her. But what about Yi Qian? What could she do even if she planned everything? Could she win against Madame Li's words? Could they win against power? Thinking of this, Sun Ying could not help but feel a little proud. She subconsciously wanted to raise her chin and face Yi Qian with an arrogant look. However, before she could do so, the bailiff who escorted her to the stage locked the small fence that was just above her waist. In the silence of the scene, the sound of the lock being unlocked was extremely loud. Everyone was summoned with a click. This was the treatment of a prisoner. As long as you were wearing a prisoner's uniform, you were a prisoner. Sun Ying, who wanted to make up for her embarrassment, did not show any arrogance. Instead, she looked a little embarrassed. Sun Ying's face turned red from embarrassment. She glanced around with the corner of her eyes and noticed something that made her feel even better. Madame Li was right. As long as she stepped forward, there was nothing she couldn't do. Look, that wretched girl Yi Qian didn't even dare to hire a lawyer. She only dared to sit in the audience. Yi Qian found it funny. She really didn't know how Sun Ying, who was wearing a prison uniform, could still put on airs in front of her. Just because Mrs. Li agreed to hire a lawyer for her. She agreed to let her regain her freedom today? How could she be so naive? She was not naive. She was stupid. Chapter 2493. In a fit of anger, Madame Li could make her lose everything. She could even force Sun Dongqing into a dead end. In the end, she completely fell out with Yi Zhifan. In the end, their relationship as husband and wife was ruined. A letter of complaint was sent to the Commission for Discipline Inspection, and they became enemies. Sun Ying actually thought that she could get away with Madame Li like this. Pitiful, pitiful, really pitiful. She was certain that what awaited Sun Ying after she walked out of the courthouse was definitely not freedom, but a dead end where she could neither live nor die. A dead end that was pitch black and full of thorns that would cause Sun Ying to bleed with every step she took. In the face of Sun Ying's arrogance, Yi Qian smiled faintly. He glanced at Sun Ying and didn't look at her anymore. Yi Qian didn't hire a lawyer, so the whole process ended very quickly. In addition, Madame Li hired a lawyer for Sun Ying and made sufficient preparations. Sun Ying, who was sent back by the army, had already received the punishment she deserved and should be released in court. The presiding judge had already looked at Sun Ying's case. As the lawyer said, Sun Ying didn't commit any substantial crimes. Her main crime was defamation. The lawyer that Madame Li hired for Yi Qian also submitted the documents, which happened to be the documents that Yi Qian signed yesterday. Everything went according to Madame Li's plan. Sun Ying was forgiven by Yi Qian and would be released in court after she apologized. Sun Dongqing cried tears of joy. Great, great, her precious daughter was finally fine. Everything was over. It was all over. Everything she did was worth it. It was all worth it. Great, great, it's finally fine. It's finally fine. At this moment, Sun Dongqing's tears rushed out. Even if she was going to be locked up for 8 to 10 years, she didn't mind. She was happy, but Yi Zhifan glared at her angrily. Yi Qian said yesterday that he wouldn't let Sun Ying leave, but he didn't do it. She didn't do what she promised him. For a moment, Yi Zhifan was so angry that his vision turned black. He wanted to rush over and question Yi Qian. When the students sitting in the audience and the villagers of Shuiku village heard what Sun Ying had done to Yi Ying all these years, they were all dumbfounded. How could she frame Yi Qian like this? At that time, she said something about Yi Qian writing a love letter to the math teacher, and she even saw it. Oh my God, I believed her. Also, when she said that Yi Qian plagiarized during the exam, I also believed her. He even helped her speak up for Yi Qian. This is too much. Sun Ying had been using us all along. Do you think we're fools? Your Honor, this judgment is unfair to Yi Qian. A high school classmate stood up and pointed at Sun Ying. He said angrily, she started rumors and caused Yi Qian to suffer so much. She was misunderstood by so many people. But look at her now. She's not repentant at all. He's obviously proud of himself. It's not fair. She can't be convicted of slander so easily. It was too light. Such a person was clearly the scum of society. She won't be grateful even if we let her off just like that. She even thinks that it's only right. Your Honor, you can't do this. She did so many wrong things and almost caused Yi Qian to drop out of school. How can she be let off with just an apology? It wasn't just one person who protested. After one person started it, at least 10 people joined in. Hearing these voices, Sun Ying, who was so scared that her face turned pale, shrunk her shoulders. She held onto the railing tightly to support her weak body. Chapter 2494. Uda had a bold mouth and chimed in, "We're not convinced either. Sun Ying has been bullying Yi Qian since she was young. How is it just a matter of an apology? She should at least pay some compensation. What's with the damage to her reputation? What damage to her reputation? Even if she's fine, she can forget about staying in the village anymore. She's a disgrace. She's causing us to be pointed at and criticize." Hearing these voices, Sun Ying was so scared that her face turned pale. She shrunk her shoulders and held on to the railing to support her weak body. Her eyes were filled with horror. She looked at her protesting classmates, then at Yi Qian, then at the judge. No, she couldn't just sit here and wait for her death. She had to think of a way. The solemn courtroom suddenly became noisy. Sun Dongqing flew into a rage. The young villagers objected, and the villagers said that her daughter was not allowed to return to the village. Everyone wanted her daughter to continue suffering. She couldn't stand it anymore and yelled, "Who do you think you are? What right do you have to talk about my daughter?" She wanted to continue yelling, but the presiding judge picked up the hammer and hit it 3 times. "Silence, silence." He then said to the bailiff, "Take her away." He didn't want Sun Dongqing to listen in anymore. Sun Dongqing, who had just heard the result, was finally relieved. But now, she was on tenterhooks again. The bailiff took her away and she immediately struggled. "No, I'm not leaving. I want to hear the result. I'm Sun Ying's mother. I have the right to listen in. You're disrupting the order of the court. Take her away." The presiding judge slammed the hammer in his hand. The bailiff no longer showed mercy and dragged Sun Dongqing away from the scene like a dead pig. Seeing this, Yi Zhifan, who was furious in his heart, revealed a cold smile. Endangering the safety of the court or disrupting the order of the court was punishable by a fine or detention according to the relevant laws. If a crime was committed, criminal responsibility would be pursued according to the law. Unfortunately, the useless Sun Dongqing didn't manage to break free from the bailiff. Otherwise, there would be more to see. After Sun Dongqing was forcefully dragged away, the entire courtroom quieted down and adjourned for the time being. Above, the presiding judge was talking to the jury in detail. Below, Yi Qian was talking to his old classmate. When things quieted down, the court was temporarily adjourned. Yi Qian smiled at his old classmate who was furious after discovering the truth. "Thank you, old classmate, for defending me. Some things are better left unsaid. Everyone just needs to believe me. Regardless of whether Sun Ying is truly repentant or not, now that the truth is out, I have nothing to be unhappy about. She has indeed been punished. We have to believe that the trial was fair and just. I know everyone is angry and wants to fight for justice for me. But, old classmate, I've made it very clear just now. Sun Ying's crime is indeed defamation." She felt indignant for Yi Qian, and angry that she had been deceived. With Yi Qian's persuasion, the voices gradually died down. "Are you really going to forgive her just like that? Yi Qian, look at all the things she has done. How despicable. Although it doesn't cause any physical harm, sometimes the damage to one's heart is deeper than the visible damage." Zhong Na pursed her lips and said in a low and cold voice, "Now is the time to teach her a lesson. She should be taught a lesson. Look at her behavior just now. How is she admitting her wrongdoings? She was clearly provoking you. Even if she was provoking you, she was like a grasshopper in the late autumn. She wouldn't be able to jump around for long." Chapter 2495. Yi Qian couldn't explain to them how painful Sun Ying's life would be in the future. She still remembered how they defended her classmates, especially her high school classmates. They were all hostile towards Sun Ying. "Didn't you say that we should be lenient whenever possible?" Even Yi Qian didn't take it to heart. Why are you all taking it to heart? A discordant voice was heard. Everyone looked over. It was He Jiamin. Seeing that everyone was looking at her with dissatisfaction, He Jiamin felt timid. She lowered her head and said timidly, I didn't say anything wrong. Yi Qian is a soldier now. He can't possibly make things difficult for Sun Ying. It'll affect his image. Anyway, I think that since Yi Qian didn't take it to heart, we don't have to either. He Jiamin dug her nails into her palms and finished her sentence. Yi Qian glanced at her. Her gaze deepened. He Jiamin felt a little scared by her gaze. She immediately put on a fawning smile. That's right. Jiamin is right. Her smile made Yi Qian raise her brows slightly. She didn't seem to notice anything. Instead, she heaved a sigh of relief and said, that's what Jiamin meant. So, thank you, my old classmates, for defending me. Since she didn't have any objections, the classmates who came over to listen didn't have any objections either. This matter was between Yi Qian and Sun Ying. Since the person in charge didn't have any objections, it would be annoying if they continued to talk about it. He Jiamin turned her head away and exhaled softly. Out of the corner of her eye, she suddenly saw Tan Wei staring at her coldly. He Jiamin's expression stiffened. Then, she gently tugged at the corners of her mouth and forced a smile. Jiamin, do you really think you can make things difficult for Yi Qian just because of this? Tan Wei said coldly. Don't think that you're smart. Yi Qian didn't get to where she is today just because of her good grades. Here, he pointed to his head and then tapped his eyes. She's here, here. Everything's clear. Everything's clear as day. You can't even hide it from me. Do you think you can hide it from Yi Qian? He Jiamin's lips trembled. After a while, she pretended not to understand and replied with a stiff face, what are you talking about? I don't understand. Even if you don't understand, it's fine as long as you understand. After Tan Wei finished speaking, he gave He Jiamin a final kind warning before looking away. Some people would not turn back until they hit the wall. Jiao Minute and Sun Ying were essentially the same type of people. They would not turn back even if they fell and bled. There was no point in persuading him any further, lest he end up becoming enemies. Yi Qian, who had comforted his classmate, also used the same words to appease the villagers. Compared to his classmate, the villagers were much calmer. Village chief Zhong Degua, who was addicted to smoking, rubbed a cigarette in his hand. After hearing the explanation, he put the cigarette back into his pocket and sighed. We don't know anything. We'll listen to you. Whatever you say, we'll listen. The village chief is right. Little Yi, do as you see fit. Anyway, Auntie Yu has already said our opinion. We won't let Sun Ying come back to the village in the future. We don't want to ruin the good things in our village. That's it. The sooner we settle this, the sooner you can go back to school with peace of mind. You're the most promising person in the surrounding villages now. There's no need to worry about a family full of sinners. The villagers spoke one after another. Everything they said was up to Yi Qian. They didn't have any opinions. These things, they didn't understand. Chapter 2496. When the trial resumed, it was completely silent. The lawyer Madame Li hired for Yi Qian once again expressed that they had no objections to the trial. They would apologize and compensate Yi Qian for the damage to his reputation. Yi Zhifan couldn't help but close his eyes. He didn't want to hear any more. She had played all her cards, but in the end, all she got was Yi Qian's deception. There was no way she could pull Sun Ying down. That's right. With Madame Li's intervention, what could Yi Qian, a military academy student, do? She didn't ask the people behind her to intervene. She definitely couldn't do anything. Sun Ying, who had waited for the final verdict, smiled. This time, she was much smarter. She lowered her head and smiled. She smiled so proudly that her shoulders trembled. It looked like she was crying. The fence was opened, and the bailiff unlocked the handcuffs on her hands. He said, "Congratulations." Then, he led Sun Ying away from the courtroom. Without the handcuffs, Sun Ying felt like she was free. She didn't feel embarrassed. She lifted her chin slightly and walked step by step to Yi Qian's stand. She stared at Yi Qian, her eyes burning with fighting spirit. She really wanted to tell Yi Jian loudly that everything was in vain. She would never be able to defeat Sun Ying. She wanted to laugh out loud. She wanted to laugh at Yi Qian's empty scheme. She wanted to laugh at how she had to bow down to Madame Li's power even though she was a military academy student. Ha ha ha, Yi Qian, Yi Qian. Look, look. Look carefully. You want to scheme against me, Sun Ying? Do you think you can scheme against me, Sun Ying? Dream on. You must be dreaming. Even though Sun Ying was trying hard to suppress her smugness and laugh on the inside, it was obvious from her expression. Principal Chen, who was accompanying her, couldn't help but frown. Sun Ying didn't realize that she was wrong. She was still smugness and provoking him with her eyes. Yi Qian gently tugged at Principal Chen's hand. It's okay, Uncle Chen. She won't have many good days ahead of her. Really, trust me. Unrepentant. Principal Chen said in a low voice. His eyes were full of sharpness. This was the sharpness that only a sniper would have when he stared at his target. It had a power that made one's scalp tingle and had nowhere to run. Sun Ying, who was walking over, was swept by such a gaze. A huge wave of panic suddenly hit her, causing her knees to go soft and she stumbled a few times. As she walked closer, Sun Ying bowed deeply. Principal Chen stared at her intently. She spoke in a trembling voice, I'm sorry, Yi Qian. I was wrong. I deeply apologize for what I did in the past. It's all because I'm too vain and too competitive. I can't stand that you're more outstanding than me and more capable than me. That's why I went out to spread rumors again and again and hurt you again and again. I'm sorry, Yi Qian. I was wrong. Please forgive me. Even when she spoke, she lowered her head, not daring to look up. Principal Chen's gaze filled her with fear. It's good that you know. Now that everyone knows that you were the one who spread rumors and caused trouble behind my back, I can finally clear my name. Yi Qian played along with her, but what he said definitely wouldn't be to her liking. Now that everyone knows what kind of person you are, no one will believe you if you say anything bad about me in the future. Then I'm relieved. After all, I'm still a student. Once my reputation is damaged, it's fine if it's true, but if it's not, the person who spread the rumors will be punished by the law. Chapter 2497. This was a moderate threat, but it was also a warning. However, Yi Qian did not expect it to have any effect. She just wanted to say it, and she wanted to see Sun Ying's expression turn uglier and uglier, so she said it. I hope you don't spout nonsense in the future. Not only will people not believe you, but they will also hate you more and more. Just like now, you see. Yi Qian leaned forward slightly and said in an even lower voice, you see now, you're like a dog that has lost its home. Everyone hates you. Sun Ying was already on the verge of tolerating it. She bit her lower lip so hard that there were deep teeth marks. Just when she thought Yi Qian had finished speaking, she suddenly heard her soft chuckle. Congratulations on gaining your freedom today. In the future, each day will be more miserable than the last. And I will laugh as I see your most tragic end. Yi Qian. Her suppressed emotions exploded. Sun Ying raised her head and glared at Yi Qian. Then, she replied darkly, likewise, likewise. But I'll wait. I hope that when the time comes, it won't be your mother who comes with a knife. After saying this, Sun Ying's heart suddenly sank. Her pupils constricted as she stared at Yi Qian, trying to find something. Yi Qian did not mention that her mother had brought a knife to stab her, nor did she mention that she had thought of this idea. Why didn't she mention it? She clearly did not forget, but why didn't she mention it? Why didn't she mention it? Yi Qian did not answer her. He only revealed an even more enigmatic smile. Yi Zhifan had been paying attention to Yi Qian. When he saw a trace of ruthlessness flash past Yi Qian's calm expression, the anger in his heart was immediately extinguished. That's right, Yi Qian was someone who could endure. Sun Ying really could not be convicted of a major crime now. She would definitely wait for the right opportunity. The trial that lasted for more than an hour finally ended. As the judge slammed his gavel and announced the end of the court, everyone in courtroom number 2 stood up and watched the presiding judge and his party leave. The tightly shut heavy wooden door was pushed open, and the audience began to leave. Principal Chen did not go with Yi Qian. She would definitely have to greet her middle school and high school classmates later, so he went over to greet the villagers of Shuiku village. Huzi walked even faster. She said to Yi Qian, "You go ahead." Then she got up and left. He didn't want to come to this place a second time. It was a strange feeling. Fortunately, he had turned from black to white. Otherwise, it would be even more unnatural. As they walked out of the courthouse, a wave of heat hit them in the face. Their middle and high school classmates had all gathered together and were chatting enthusiastically with Yi Qian. Someone even suggested that they find a place to have dinner. The court session would start at 2 in the afternoon, and it was only 3 in the afternoon. It was a little early to have dinner. Let's find a coffee shop and see if there's a bigger one nearby. Otherwise, we won't be able to sit down. Zhong Na stood side by side with Yi Qian. There was a deep smile on her beautiful face. I don't think I've seen Yi Qian before. Let's chat together. That's fine. I just don't know if Yi Qian has time. We have to ask for her opinion first. Zhu Liao joked, if Yi Qian really has time, we can sit together. It was the holidays now, so Yi Qian still had time. She smiled and said, then let's find a coffee shop and sit down. We won't have dinner together tonight. I still have to go back to school after I'm done here. That's good, that's good. The sun is so hot outside. It's hurting my skin. Let's use an umbrella. I think it's hot too. They were having a good time chatting with each other. Chapter 2498. Her classmates from the same training class as Yi Qian didn't go with her. They weren't familiar with Yi Qian, so they didn't join in. They stood to the side and whispered to each other, occasionally looking up at the entrance of the court. He Jiamin looked up and said to her classmates, I won't be going. I'm not feeling well, so I want to go back to the factory to rest. She even raised her head and rubbed her forehead to increase her credibility. Just as Tan Wei had said, Yi Jian could see through her little tricks. As a special forces soldier, it was necessary for her to distinguish whether the other party was telling the truth or not through the subtle changes in a person's facial expression. He Jiamin was obviously lying, and it could be seen at a glance. What she was thinking and what she was going to do next could be seen from her constant glances at the entrance of the court. Old classmates hadn't seen each other for a long time, so it was natural for them to get together more often. Yi Qian didn't force her. He smiled and said, okay, thank you for your hard work today. It's not hard, not hard. He Jiamin saw that the people she was waiting for had appeared, so she immediately straightened her body and turned her back to the entrance of the court. She urged, hurry up and leave. Don't stand in the sun for too long. It's easy to get a heat stroke after being exposed to the air conditioner for so long. Tan Wei, whose expression changed, glanced at her. She sighed in her heart and didn't try to persuade her. Yi Qian had to go greet Principal Chen and the villagers. He said, sorry, please wait for her for a while. Then he walked in the direction of Shuiku village. Under the sunlight, her military uniform was tall and slender against the background, growing straight like bamboo. The students who were waiting for her couldn't help but stare at her back. Seeing Yi Qian, who exuded military might with every step, the junior high school students couldn't help but sigh in their hearts. She was spirited and handsome, making people worship her. Do you have a camera? I want to take a picture with her. I didn't bring any. Didn't they say we can't bring cameras? I wanted to bring it, but I put it down when I went out. What a pity. If only I brought a camera. Suddenly, the sound of an argument broke the students' lamentations. They all turned their heads to look. It turned out that the people from Sun Ying's training class were criticizing her. How could Sun Ying have the strength to fight back? She angrily shouted, you are all stupid, what does it have to do with me? You listen to whatever I say. If I tell you to drink urine, will you drink it too? Ugly people are always up to mischief, and in the end, they're blaming it on me. Get out of my way. Don't mess with me. After saying that, she pushed one of the thin and weak girls. She was easy to bully, so she pushed herself away and went down the stairs angrily. The girls behind her were not willing to give up, especially the girl who was obviously pushed down. She took off her shoes and threw them at Sun Ying angrily. The distance was close, and the target was big. The leather shoe hit Sun Ying's back. This time, she poked a hornet's nest. After being in prison for a few months, Sun Ying's personality became colder and sharper than before. If there was something wrong, she would feel that the other party was deliberately making things difficult for her. She turned her head and saw that it was a leather shoe that hit her. Without saying anything, she picked it up and threw it at her. Under the sunlight, her beautiful face was gloomy and cold. Her eyes were even colder when she looked at people. Even the air around her was filled with coldness. Sun Ying's current state caused others to feel a chill from the bottom of their feet. They couldn't help but shudder. Chapter 2499. However, those girls were the only daughters in the city. They had been holding back for a long time, so they surrounded Sun Ying and started fighting in front of the courthouse. In a black car parked across the street from the courthouse, Li Chuhai told Mrs. Li what he saw. Life isn't good. She got beaten up as soon as she left the house. Then let them beat her up first. Just don't let them get into the courthouse. Keep an eye on her. I still need her. I can't let her get away so easily. Mrs. Li said calmly and hung up the phone. She was doing skincare with Mrs. Qin, so it wasn't convenient for her to talk about this. Li Chuhai put away his phone and sat in the car with the engine running. He waited for the girls to finish fighting. The bailiff at the courthouse heard the commotion and immediately rushed down. He pulled them apart and yelled, fighting in front of the courthouse. Do you want to be sent to the police station for a few days? Stop it. You guys leave immediately. He told the girls who were in the training class with Yi Ying to leave first. They had no choice. Sun Ying had been locked up for a long time, so her body was weak. Naturally, she was beaten up badly. She was kicked a few times, and even her face was scratched. His clothes were torn apart, and his sleeves were torn apart. When she came in, it was still cold in spring. Now, it was May and the weather was getting warmer. Sun Ying was wearing a thermal jacket and a pair of jeans. The sleeves of the thermal jacket were ripped open, revealing her thin shoulders. Sun Ying had indeed lost a lot of weight after being locked up for a few months. The girls were still afraid of the bailiff. They glared at Sun Ying, who was holding her stomach, and left angrily. The commotion was so loud that it was hard for Yi Qian to ignore it. After greeting the villagers, she walked towards her classmates. However, as soon as she walked over, Sun Ying, who was holding her stomach and slowly walking down the stairs, suddenly stopped. She realized that she was in a sorry state. She endured the pain and stood up straight. She looked at Yi Qian with a gloomy gaze. Yi Qian, I will make you pay for today's humiliation. Just you wait. I will make you pay for this. Sun Ying blamed all of today's humiliation on Yi Qian. Without waiting for Yi Qian to speak, all the students began to condemn her. Sun Ying, you're really disgusting. You've done so many disgusting things, yet you still want to turn around and make things difficult for Yi Qian. How can there be someone like you? The most vicious woman's heart is you. That was too ruthless. You're trying to frame Yi Qian, yet you're still pretending to be innocent. You're so fucking disgusting. The boy couldn't take it anymore and said a few nasty words. This kind of person shouldn't have been released. Yi Qian, look, we already said that she wouldn't change no matter what. You've forgiven her, but she still resents you and thinks that she's not in the wrong. Since they weren't in the courthouse, they didn't have much scruples when speaking. Listening to everyone's condemnation, Sun Ying, who was furious, glared at her former classmates fiercely. What do you know? She was the one who took everything from me. It was this bastard who caused me to lose everything. All of you shut up. This is between me and Yi Qian. What does it have to do with you? Ha, it really does have something to do with us. Now all of us know your ugly face. You've succeeded in making all of us hate you. Sun Ying, don't come to any class gatherings in the future. We feel ashamed to have a classmate like you. You're so pretentious. There's no truth in your words at all. I really don't know where you get your sense of superiority from. You've been in prison, and so have your parents. A family of 3 wearing prison uniforms in court. Your sense of superiority is really laughable. Chapter 2500. Ha, that's not a sense of superiority, It's just that she doesn't have the confidence and has no choice but to lie to herself and pretend that she's noble. Alright, what's the point of saying so much to a disgusting person? It's just a waste of your saliva. Let's not talk about it anymore. I'll go online later and tell everyone about what happened today in the group chat. I'll let everyone in the class know. That's not a bad idea. Don't we have an alumni group? You can say that. Tell the truth, there can't be a single lie in it. Otherwise, you'll become a certain someone. More and more people knew about her. This was what Sun Ying was most afraid of. Just a second ago, she was still trying her best to straighten her back, but now, her entire body was trembling. In an instant, all the confidence in her heart seemed to have been exposed to light and turned into bubbles. With a soft sound, it disappeared into thin air. Her confidence was gone, only a deep embarrassment. Her face was burning with pain. The fire in her heart was burning even more fiercely, to the point that the veins in her eyes appeared, and the bottom of her eyes were red. Just you wait, Yi Qian, don't get too cocky. She didn't dare to stay any longer. She gritted her teeth and turned the last of her foam-like confidence into a single sentence. After she finished speaking, she immediately rushed downstairs. Sun Ying, the days of neither living nor dying are beckoning to you. Also, take good care of the jade pendant, don't lose it. As she ran, she vaguely heard Yi Zhen's voice drifting over. A huge wave of fear surged in from all directions like a tidal wave. Sun Ying's foot suddenly twisted, and in the end, she limped away. Go, don't be an eyesore in front of us. Get lost, Sun Ying, get as far away as you can. Seeing Sun Ying's fleeing figure, the eyes of her former classmates were filled with deep disgust. They were no longer afraid of what Sun Ying would do. Who would want to talk to someone with a completely ruined reputation? They couldn't wait to hide from someone like this, let alone talk about friendship with her. She had evil intentions and a vicious heart. No one dared to make friends with her, and even if they did, they would have to constantly worry about whether or not they would be killed by her. They did not have the mental fortitude of Yi Qian, who was able to calmly face Sun Ying's schemes time and time again. Yi Qian looked coldly at Sun Ying's back as she left. The students behind her looked at her, and then at Sun Ying, who was leaving in a sorry state. They all held their breaths. One ran away like a stray dog. One of them was dressed in a military uniform and had a pleasant expression on his face. One was dressed in grey, while the other was dressed in military green. 30 years in the east, 30 years in the west. The two of them had undergone an earth-shattering transformation. One was in the sky, the other was on the ground. There was no comparison. Li Chuhai watched patiently. Seeing that Sun Ying had finally escaped from the encirclement, he pursed his lips and continued to wait. Sun Ying did not dare to take a taxi at the entrance of the courthouse. The sharp voices behind her were like knives scraping her face, causing her to feel pain. It was like a mountain pressing down on her, making it difficult for her to even breathe. She walked down the stone steps until she was out of sight of her classmates. She waved for a taxi at the intersection ahead. Soon, a taxi stopped and picked up Sun Ying. A black car turned around from the opposite side of the road and followed Sun Ying's taxi as it passed by the courthouse. At that moment, Yi Qian, who was laughing and chatting with his old classmates, suddenly raised his head and looked in the direction of the road. Just a moment ago, she felt a gaze sweep past her at an extremely fast speed. Even through the car window, she could feel the coldness and chill.